Welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, and thank you for joining me tonight. It is good to have you here this Monday night as we're continuing with lots of different stuff that's going on in the news. Really just a bunch of despondent headlines. Every other headline is filled with drama and chaos and negativity, either about this administration or something that is going on in the States. So tonight, I want to give you just a bit of a reprieve at the top of the show, some bright spots of resistance. In 2010, in the nation of Hungary, this man came to power. His name is Viktor Orban. And over time, he and his party have systematically dismantled the country's legal system, bending the courts to their will. They have rigged the election system to ensure that every single election in Hungary essentially it results in their victory. And it has also become increasingly harder to criticize the government. Opposition is effectively illegal. Orban has gone after the media by withdrawing their license and censoring the content they produce. Media in the country has effectively become state-run and are mostly controlled by oligarchs who favor the prime minister. Orban was a frequent guest on Tucker Carlson's show, when he had one, on Fox News. Fox Entertainment, I should say. It's not actually news, more like propaganda. But Viktor Orban he's anti-immigration. He thinks that higher education for women is a threat to traditional gender roles because, female empowerment is such a threat that's going to end us all. He believes in and has essentially promoted that white supremacy is great, but also white supremacists are being replaced in mass. He essentially has endorsed the white supremacist great replacement theory. Essentially that too many people of color are replacing the great white race, and we need to do something about it. He once said that Europe is, quote, committing suicide by allowing immigration, end quote. Orban has not just attacked institutions and democracy in Hungary, he has also effectively gone after the civilian population as well. Hungary has passed several restrictive abortion laws in cahoots with their pro-life agenda. He is completely against LGBTQ plus rights, labeling the families as illegitimate, and calls for a return to traditional family values. Hungarians have been fighting back in many ways for years, resisting the authoritarian takeover of their government. We will not allow our country to be controlled by you and your cronies. We will not let this take place. And as it turns out, it is Pride Month, and Viktor Orban's government recently banned the annual Pride Parade. He warned essentially people against coming out, saying that they'd face legal consequences for anyone that celebrated. That did not work, because despite the strongman antics that he tried to portray, that he tries to exude, more than 100,000 people marched in the streets of Hungary to say, we are not afraid of you. In the face of an authoritarian leader, more than 100,000 people showed up. Victoria Radvinia actually believes essentially that the number is closer to 180,000 to 280,000. She is the president of the Pride there in Budapest, Hungary. She said essentially that there has never been this much people out to celebrate Pride, taking an overt, defiant stance against the authoritarian regime that is in Hungary. Think about how incredible this is. I mean, look at the size of that crowd. Edith Roxa, a special education teacher who traveled from southern Hungary to participate in the march, told the New York Times, quote, what is most painful for me is to see how stupid they think we all are. End quote. So again, it's in the broad face of authoritarianism that people are rising up, not just here at home, but also around the world to fight back against what's going on, against the attacks on institutions and against the attack on civil liberties. I mean, Pride was banned by Parliament, as well as other large-scale celebrations like this. It was banned in Hungary. The media in Hungary reports on LGBTQ people in a way that is degrading, in a way that effectively erases them from culture, because they are basically an extension of Hungary's authoritarian leader, Viktor Orban. The propaganda, the hate the degradation of humanity and institutions, and the evisceration of the rule of law in Hungary, that did not work. It did not work to intimidate the people en masse, because everyone knows, as I always say on this show, mass resistance defeats authoritarianism. When you have a unified collective front of the citizenry, with politicians included, against that type of governance, it always wins. Sometimes it takes longer, but it always wins. Over the weekend in Serbia, university students and professors in Belgrade have repeatedly blocked roads and set up barricades, demanding snap elections and accusing President Alexander Vučić of corruption and authoritarian consolidation of power. Police have dismantled the barricades and made numerous arrests in those clashes. The crowd could be heard chanting, "We want elections," essentially saying that elections are the only way to end the authoritarian rule that's currently happening in Serbia. We have seen numerous examples of mass resistance all across the world here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show as we've been covering it. It is something that is growing. As authoritarian governments are rising across the world, mass resistance is rising up to meet that moment, to say, we are not going to give in. We are not going to capitulate. If institutions fall, if institutions give in, we as the citizenry, who are the last line of defense here, we will hold the line. We will protect our rights. We will protect our neighbors. We will protect our democratic republic. Here in the United States, we've seen that same type of resistance here at home with the major protests that have been happening all across the country since Donald Trump has taken office. First, it was essentially the big hands-off rallies and all those protests against Donald Trump and Elon Musk in terms of what they were doing to completely slash the federal government in terms of spending, as well as firing federal workers en masse. We saw that earlier this year. Recently, we saw the huge amalgamation of protests for No King's Day. Hundreds of thousands, I think up to millions of people showed out in the streets of American cities to protest against what this administration is doing, to abuse human rights, against what this administration is doing, to go after the rule of law, against what this administration is doing. And in multiple different areas to just completely get rid of the system of government that has been in place in this country for 2 centuries. According to the organizers of that event, there is going to be a No King's Day Part 2 on July 4th, celebrating the independence of the United States and how we effectively fled tyranny to build our own democratic republic, and how we need to be reminded of that in this current moment under a person that is extremely authoritarian and tyrannical. But while we wait for that moment, we are also seeing other local acts of resistance across the country. After the kidnapping of residents in Pasadena, California, you can see here on this video it taking place. After that kidnapping, protesters rallied together and found the hotel where ICE agents were. They found the hotel where ICE agents were staying, and they made noise and started chanting, and eventually got so loud and so unbearable that the hotel staff asked the ICE agents to leave.
Outside this Winchell's Donut shop in Pasadena, the message to federal officials is anything but sweet.
Stop cruelty and stop raids. I mean, the raids are cruel. They're not unnecessary.
Organizers putting together what was described as a vigil to demand ICE get out of Pasadena after they say 6 workers were taken by ICE agents from the area earlier today. The mood, vibrant and passionate. This demonstration location, the same one where bystanders say they recorded what happened this morning.
I think everybody is infuriated right now because, this is supposed to be a safe community.
Brandon Lamar is the president of NAACP Pasadena and shared this video of ICE agents appearing to detain 2 people just outside the donut shop. He also shared this video of a federal agent getting out of his vehicle to confront someone before eventually driving away.
Community members don't know where these people are. Their families probably have not been notified. And so those are the things that we're really trying to figure out at this point while also keeping our community together.
Again, that is local reporting there from just these acts of resistance, these protests, the pushback against ICE and what they are doing in local communities all across the country. And, people just thinking that, members of this administration just thinking that, people are just going to allow this to happen. They're not. Resistance is growing, and it's getting bigger and bigger. Pushback is working. According to the Clarion Ledger, there is a sick out planned for next month. Basically, we are sick of ICE, so they're calling it a sick out. It's designed to support immigrants in the United States amid mass deportation efforts. In the broader context of resistance from the opposition party, California Governor Gavin Newsom recently sued Fox News for defamation. He accuses the entertainment group of defaming him in his in its discussion of a phone call that he had with Donald Trump during the LA protest. Newsom has offered to withdraw the lawsuit if Fox News retracts its claim that the governor lied about the call, despite releasing the evidence, and also if host Jesse Waters issues an on-air apology. Several Democratic attorney generals recently testified before Congress and said, "None of us are tired. We are going to continue to fight back as this administration is taking away rights and is going after the states in a way that is trying to make the country basically the way it was in terms of Civil War times, where we're just going back to states' rights." All across the country this year, Democrats have been crushing local and statewide races, from Omaha, Nebraska electing its first black mayor, to New York, where amid a crowded field of candidates and a pro-Trump mayor, Zohran Mamdani won in the Democratic primary for mayor. He is seeking to become the city's first Muslim and Indian mayor, not to mention a young one at that. This viral video here capturing him yelling at Tom Homan, Donald Trump's border czar, in a strong condemnation of his role in the cruel mass deportation campaign that is happening all across the country. Zohran Mamdani is a Democratic socialist, and he was very elated on election night upon securing victory. And this is him speaking alongside New York Attorney General Tish James as they took the stage.
This has been a historically contentious race. One that has filled our airwaves with millions in smears and slander. I hope now that this primary has come to an end. I can introduce myself once more. Not as you've seen me in a 30-second ad or in a mailer in your mailbox, but as how I will lead as your mayor. I will be the mayor for every New Yorker. Whether you voted for me, for Governor Cuomo, or felt too disillusioned by a long, broken political system to vote at all, I will fight for a city that works for you, that is affordable for you, that is safe for you. I will work to be a mayor you will be proud to call your own. I cannot promise that you will always agree with me, but I will never hide from you. If you are hurting, I will try to heal. If you feel misunderstood, I will strive to understand. Your concerns will always be mine, and I will put your hopes before my own.
He kept focused on his message. He wasn't concerned about the money. It was all about the power of the message, the power of his word. And so I saw in my beloved Brooklyn and all throughout this city that this campaign was fueled. It was fueled by the power of people. People yearning for change in this city. People who heard his message. And we all came together.
So that feeling of joy and euphoria is palpable as the resistance movement is growing right now. His candidacy has been surrounded by racism and threats to deport him, even anti-Muslim rhetoric from members of his own party. That's something that we've been seeing. This is what he said on Meet the Press yesterday.
I want to talk about the historic nature of your candidacy. If you were to win, you would become the first Muslim mayor of New York City. Along the way, throughout the course of this primary campaign, you have received death threats. You've received all sorts of attacks online. Congressman Andy Ogles called for you to be deported, for example, because you were born in Uganda. He also issued an Islamophobic epithet, which I am not going to repeat here. But what type of toll has this taken on you personally and on your family?
It's been difficult. It's been difficult to have to deal with the regular and repeated smears and slander upon my name and on the very basis of my faith. And I think what's so sad is that this is but a glimpse into what life is like for many Muslim New Yorkers and many New Yorkers of different faiths who are constantly being told that they don't belong in this city and in this country that they love. And ultimately, what continues to give me hope is that these moments are but small examples, something that goes against what so many New Yorkers actually feel. Because what we know is that this is a city for all of us. And what Tuesday night showed is that what New Yorkers want more than anything is a vision that binds us all together of the neighborhood.
All right. You are a self-described democratic socialist. Do you think that billionaires have a right to exist?
I don't think that we should have billionaires because, frankly, it is so much money in a moment of such inequality. And ultimately, what we need more of is equality across our city and across our state and across our country. And I look forward to work with everyone, including billionaires, to make a city that is fairer for all of them. Well,
let me ask you.
Quote, I don't think we should have billionaires. End quote. So, Zohran Mamdani, he is a very popular person among constituents, but he is also trying to gain Democratic support, basically. As someone put it, Democrats are fighting Mamdani harder than they've ever fought Trump. But this is a new day. It turns out people do not want octogenarians in charge anymore, or a party that barely fights back. As Joy Reid once said, Democrats are too orderly for fascism. This is not business as usual. When it comes to fighting this type of governmental abuse, you cannot play the game of decorum and decency. That route is going to end this country. That route is going to lead to this democratic republic completely eviscerating. It is time to fight fire with fire. Republicans do not want to compromise. They are not going to vote on your bill. They are not going to vote in good favor because they do not have a soul. They do not have a moral compass. They have excused and endorsed every single thing that Donald Trump has done. No, it does not. No, they do not get a pass for secretly disagreeing with Donald Trump in the elevator, telling a Democratic senator, I don't actually agree with this bill that Trump is putting up. I actually don't agree with what Trump is doing right now, but I'm not going to say anything in public because I'm just a coward. That's what we're contending with here. Republicans do not care about truth, nor do they care about democracy, nor do they care about their constituents. It is all about power. It is all about enabling Donald Trump. So in the face of that, of course, there's going to be new Democratic leadership that rises up because the people are voracious for something different. They are voracious for something more, for something that is alternative and powerful, and it is great. That is why Zohran Mamdani won that election in New York City. That is why. And we will see what happens in the general election. But what I can tell you is there is a resistance movement that is growing in this country that is getting stronger, and it is becoming more impatient, and it is becoming more hell-bent and vehement on ensuring that we do not lose this democratic republic. Ensuring that we continue to have collective pushback against this authoritarian administration. And it's not just here, it's around the world. It's people collectively coming out to defy an authoritarian prime minister in Hungary. It's people fighting back, demanding elections amid authoritarians consolidating power in Serbia. Do not think that we are alone in this collective fight to push back on the rise of authoritarianism. The world is with us. More to come tonight. Stay with us. The Jeremiah Patterson Show is an independent news media platform. If you want to see more special reports like this, please consider becoming a paid subscriber to my Substack at tjpsnews. When you become a paid subscriber, you'll get immediate access to exclusive content, opinion pieces, the upcoming Resistance podcast, and The More You Know, a series focused on diving deeper behind the headlines with historical context. According to one viewer who upgraded to a paid subscription, quote, "I like your deep dive style. There are many doing the quick news updates, which is helpful, but we need both." Another viewer said, "Jeremiah, you are a fantastic reporter and I truly value your work." I do this because it matters, because the investigative journalism is imperative, and most of all, I'm unabashed and unafraid to tell the truth. Upgrade now from free to paid for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year. When Donald Trump nominated Lee Zeldin to be the EPA director, he made the oil guys freaking happy because EPA director Lee Zeldin is extremely pro-oil, and he actually is doing everything that is antithetical and believes in everything that is antithetical to the actual role of the Environmental Protection Agency. I mean, I recently did a special report on the EPA and the history of its leaders and Ann Gorsuch. He's kind of worse than Ann Gorsuch. I mean, right now, the director of the EPA is touring the country promoting Donald Trump's, quote, big, beautiful bill. He is pushing for that like it's not just going to completely gut environmental protections across the country and be completely devastating for climate change. But that's what he's doing right now. Of course, recently the EPA has, cut hundreds of grants, leaving cities on the hook for climate resiliency. According to the EPA, as they're doing this because apparently those grants are too woke. They protect diversity, equity, and inclusion? Absolutely not. These grants are protecting communities of color from toxic chemicals and waste? Let's get rid of that. That's what we're watching right now take place. The EPA is being completely gutted. Like I said, this is almost worse than Ann Gorsuch. Completely worse. We're seeing across the country right now as these grants have been cut to several different parts. I mean, it's just going to make it more devastating. According to reporting from The Guardian, Trump's EPA has recently announced major rollbacks to power plant pollution limits. More than 200 health experts say essentially that regulatory proposals will lead to the biggest increase in pollution in decades. Just for comparison, look at this here. I covered this on that special report on the war on the EPA. Look at this. This is the Cayuga River back in the 1960s. You see how there was a bunch of unnecessary trash in the ocean? Well, yeah, it's going to be that times 10. Do you know what eventually happened to the Cayuga River? It caught on fire. It caught on fire. We are about to be back in the same spot, back in the 1960s, where there was no regulatory agency to tell corporations, hey, you cannot just have an oil spill in the ocean. You cannot just dump waste in the ocean and then it sits there. It harms the animals. It kills the animals. It is irrevocably dangerous to the environment. We are now back in that situation where corporations are freaking loving Lee Zeldin because he is so pro-oil. He is pro slash the environment. That's what we are contending with here. We've already seen mass firings at the EPA this year, as it's just been completely devastating for, a whole bunch of people across the country. In regard to the grants that have been cut at the agency, local governments, tribes, and nonprofits have sued the Trump administration over essentially cutting those EPA grants. According to Colorado Newsline here, nonprofits, tribes, and local governments filed a lawsuit Wednesday against the Trump administration over its termination of federal environmental justice and climate justice grants. The complaint against the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency argues the grant terminations were unlawful because Congress approved them. Earlier this year, the EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin canceled more than 400 environmental justice grants totaling $1.7 billion. Quote, America's support for homegrown local solutions to serious problems is crucially important, he wrote. We are happy to be going to bat. Essentially, we are happy to be going to fight back against what's happening here. These are our communities. The EPA is supposed to protect us. Now what? They're against us? They're not helping here? Think about how devastating this is. Especially for communities of color, communities who are disproportionately impacted when it comes to environmental racism and environmental injustice. Communities that sit in toxic chemical waste for years, like Cancer Alley in Louisiana. We're going to have a full special report on that in the coming weeks. We've been following that story for years, and it's just devastating what's been happening there. But in regard to these grant cuts, I want to show you something here. This is questioning between a Democratic senator in Congress, Oregon Democratic senator, and this is Lee Zeldin answering his question on the cuts that have been taking place to the agency, and is also these unlawful cancellation of these grants. Watch.
So, as you can tell from my opening statement, I'm very concerned about the issue of impoundments. Are you familiar with the concept?
Of course, Senator.
You understand that it involves freezing funds that are to be allocated by law?
Senator, I'm familiar with the impoundments. I also understand we're having this conversation in the middle of the fiscal year as opposed to after the fiscal year.
Do you understand that the Constitution of the United States assigns the power of the purse to Congress, and do you follow that understanding?
Absolutely.
So you understand that when you impound funds, you are violating the law?
No, Senator. We are going to follow all statutory obligations, and we will abide by all laws.
But you're not. You're impounding funds against the law.
We absolutely disagree with you very strongly.
And the courts have also found it's not just against the law, it's unconstitutional.
If you're citing a particular district court judge, Senator, that's one thing. But there's a lot of district court judges coming up with their own interpretations of the law. That'll go through litigation processes,
so
but at
it is the Supreme Court of the United States that has weighed in. And do you consider the Supreme Court not to be a legitimate source of decision making?
Of course, the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land.
Then why are you not following the Supreme Court's understanding of the Constitution and the law?
We are following all laws and the Constitution.
Then why have you frozen $1.7 billion in EJ grants illegally and unconstitutionally?
They are neither illegal or unconstitutionally frozen, Senator.
Are they legally frozen?
Yes, Senator.
Under what authority of the law?
Senator, Congress appropriates funding, and then say if the Biden administration is in place last year and they're there at the beginning of the fiscal year, they might apply their own administration's policy priorities. So they might decide to send money to, say, the state of Alaska, and they might include aspects of fighting for equity or education instead of remediation.
But it wasn't the Biden administration that passed this law, it was Congress. And so this is in the law as written and as signed by his president, and yet you're defying it.
Yeah, Senator, it would be important that the premise of your question, I mean, we're going to have to just disagree as strongly as possible.
You've also frozen the greenhouse gas reduction funds, again, illegally and unconstitutionally. Are you going
neither
to follow
illegally
the
or unconstitutionally, Senator?
Well, we now have several court decisions that have said you have acted, and you referred to district court decisions, but you don't agree with those district courts?
Senator, if you're referring to a district court decision that was then stayed by the D.C. Circuit, then I would also encourage you to look at the appeals process, which is important. And as you referenced earlier in a prior question, how important it is to look at the Supreme Court. Well, then that message that you would be making to the D.C. District Court judge is that the D.C. District Court judge didn't even have jurisdiction over that case and it belonged inside the Court of Federal Claims. I agree with you how important it is to consider the decisions of the Supreme Court.
So there is one district court decision you abided by, and that was related to the clean school buses. If other district courts say that this is an illegal impoundment, an unconstitutional impoundment, will you follow the findings of those district courts, or will you simply appeal it upwards?
We will abide by all laws and the United States Constitution at all times.
Well, again, The administration has responded to some district court decisions by saying we will simply appeal it. We'll seek a stay in an appeal. Will you follow, when a district court says you've illegally impounded funds, will you follow that district court decision?
Well, as you pointed out, Senator, the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. So if a district court judge makes a decision, we are not going to assume that the United States Supreme Court is going to agree with that district court.
Even though the Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that impoundments are unconstitutional. So your decision is to simply appeal to the Supreme Court seeking a different decision this time around?
Well, I know that we're talking about hypotheticals of district court decisions to come, but as far as the district court decisions
It's actually
that
not
have been
hypothetical because we already have a series of district court decisions saying that this is illegal and unconstitutional.
And as far as the district court decisions that have been made, it's important to note, as I stated a minute ago, the district court judge decision that you're referencing in the D.C. Circuit was instantly stayed by the D.C. Circuit.
Do you understand that impounding funds essentially makes the appropriation power of Congress very difficult? We have to reach decisions about funding that is important to Alaska, to Oregon, but also to every region of the country. And if then we strike this law, we strike these decisions to help address environmental issues in every part of the country, and then the executive comes along and says, we want the power of the purse. We're going to treat these laws as suggestions. We're going to freeze these funds for programs we don't like, or regions we don't like, or congressional districts we don't like, that completely undermines the dialogue and the ability of here in Congress to produce bipartisan bills?
Senator, I don't know if on either side of the dais I've ever heard in one round of question more premise of questions that I possibly disagree with. I refuse to waste $1 of tax dollars, period.
Since you are violating both the law and the Constitution, will you follow your oath? And if you can't follow your oath, will you resign from your office?
Yeah. Senator, listen, you like to preface your questions with declaring everything unconstitutional and illegal. We couldn't possibly disagree more strongly with what you're saying. What I do believe would be illegal is for me to play along where I'm seeing unqualified recipients getting funding, where I see an entity like a $2 billion recipient, Power Forward Communities, that gets $100 of GGR funds in 2023, and then they get $2 billion in 2024. When I see self-dealing and conflicts of interest, loading up recipients of people who are Biden officials and Obama officials and Democrat donors, when I see wording of financial agent agreements and account control agreements that tie the hands of the EPA behind its back, will I play along with that? No, absolutely not, because this is the...
In which case you should resign, because the president is involved in self-dealing at a level we have never seen on these crypto.
Senator, if I refuse to waste money, I should resign?
Madam Chair, I will just conclude by saying this issue of impoundments is an extraordinary challenge. The Supreme Court has ruled twice. The Constitution is clear. You took an oath to the Constitution, and it's extremely destructive of our legislative process for you to be engaged in this.
Let's move.
Again, that was very powerful and intense questioning there from Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, and asking the EPA director, hey, what the heck is going on? What are you doing? You know what you're doing is illegal, right? This is Congress. We approved those grants. You can't just be canceling it because anti-DEI. You can't just be canceling it because you want to. You can't just be canceling it because the president tells you to cancel it, or because you're pro-oil and the oil industry loves you. It's unconstitutional. It's illegal to cancel those grants. I'd recently talked about the mass firings that are happening at the EPA. Donald Trump has recently asked EPA employees to snitch on colleagues who are working on DEI initiatives. They declined. So the resistance is not just, in the streets. It's also in our federal agencies in terms of organizations and people stepping up to defend what's left of our groups, of our federal organizations and our agencies that protect us, especially an agency that is as crucial as the EPA. Last month, I got the chance to interview the person who wrote this article here, ProPublica environmental reporter Mark Olalde. Here was that interview. Joining me now for the interview is Mark Olalde. He's a ProPublica investigative journalist. Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Of course, thanks for having me.
In the past 2 years, we've seen the EPA weakened by the Supreme Court, and now Lee Zeldin, who is praised by oil corporations, is the head of the EPA. We've seen mass firings earlier this year at the agency. You recently reported that the Trump administration asked employees to snitch on colleagues working on DEI initiatives, and they declined. My question to you is, how has the morale at the EPA shifted under this new pressure campaign?
It's really not great. I think that's probably a bit unsurprising, right? We've seen reductions in force. We've seen repeated offers for buyouts, kind of early retirements. We've seen environmental justice programs slashed, all sorts of funding freezes and really chaos at the agency. So morale and just the general vibe in the agency, it's not great right now.
What specific changes are Trump and Zeldin proposing for the EPA? I know there has been, he testified before the Senate, and there was talk about him canceling grants in a lot of communities at the agency that is not congressionally approved. How are these initiatives, these new changes to the agency to regulate, pollution and enforce environmental laws going to affect it?
Absolutely. And that's one of the big ones is money going out the door. If you look at back to Project 2025 and some of the other kind of conservative roadmaps for a second Trump administration, there was really an emphasis on getting money out of the hands of nonprofits and NGOs, kind of these non-governmental entities, which I guess could sound good. I see the concern about why is money going to these non-governmental entities, but really that's been a large way the government's functioned for years, is identifying organizations at the community level that have the knowledge, that have the relationships, have the capacity at a local level, and leveraging all of that to do some of this work, whether it's outreach, monitoring, environmental justice, et cetera. And so a lot of those groups have really seen their funding hit. And within the agency itself, one of the biggest impacts we've seen is at the Office of Research and Development, or ORD, which is where a lot of the science within the EPA is done. And that specifically has been targeted for mass layoffs. So we've lost a lot of the institutional kind of science knowledge, lab work, and that sort of thing that's been done at the EPA. And the ORD does a lot of work assisting local responses, assisting state agencies, kind of backfilling scientific and technical needs all over the country. And so as we lose capacity in the laboratory and the science front, we really lose a lot of that backstop for efforts like pollution monitoring around the country.
There has been reporting that the EPA in some circumstances is no longer focusing on toxic chemicals in vulnerable communities. What are the dangerous implications of that, especially for, communities that are less fortunate in this country that really essentially are in these spaces where, like Cancer Alley?
Absolutely. It's not an opinion that pollution in America has disproportionately impacted low income, kind of historically disenfranchised communities of color. That's been shown scientifically time and again, right? We know already that communities of color in urban areas are much less likely to have green spaces and tree cover. And so you're going to have air quality impacts. You're going to have kind of the urban heat island effect being worse. These things have been studied and shown. You could look at everything from the uranium industry being sited extensively near Native American land in the West to highways being built through Black communities, right? Yeah. And so there is this clear need to have, this focus on kind of environmental justice type communities, not as part of some kind of quote unquote woke agenda, but because that is where pollution in many parts of the country is just worse. And so that's Cancer Alley is another perfect example of that in Louisiana. And we've seen a number of programs that were specific to addressing pollution there or in other kind of frontline communities, being some of the first to be cut. And, in the Trump administration's first day, President Trump signed an executive order targeting diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility initiatives. And for whatever reason, the topic of environmental justice writ large got pulled into that as if it were the same thing as DEI and A, even though there are, of course, major differences between those two kind of topics. And so, as we've had this all of government pulling back from acknowledging that the country has historical issues based on demographics, we're seeing that play out in the type of work that EPA and other agencies can actually do in certain disenfranchised communities.
Lastly, I wanted to ask you if these massive changes, and as well as like the staff that has been fired or that has left, and the sense of fear that has been installed at the agency, if these changes are irrevocable, if the damage is already done so bad, and how this will affect communities writ large, because the EPA is a massive federal agency that helps regulate and do major investigations. So are these changes reversible?
We see changes to federal policy, to federal staffing, to federal priorities between every administration. Environmental justice, for instance, has ebbed and flowed. It's not always been the level it was under the Biden administration, which was, historical highs in terms of a focus on that topic. Uh, so pausing this work, until the next administration, uh, it will be difficult to quickly rebuild staffing, right? It will be difficult to quickly rebuild programs to get funding back up to the same level. If you are in the workforce and you have a skill set that you might want to look at to work at the federal government, well, in a post 2025 world, you might not want to do that because the job stability that once was offered by working in a federal capacity has been shown to no longer be there. We've seen how the unionized aspects of the federal government are much safer, and we know that much of the federal government is not unionized. And so it definitely sets back a lot of priority areas of federal government work, research, monitoring, regulations, many years. Can this be rebuilt by a new administration down the line? I don't see why not. But at the same time, what's going to be lost in the interim is difficult to tell. And frankly, the impacts on communities, the public health implications of stopping some of these programs, stopping some of this research, stopping some of this monitoring will show themselves, but they might not show themselves for years and years until we have chronic exposures to pollution, contaminants, and the rest.
I know I said last question, but I actually have another question here. Because I've been asking other reporters about, what's going on at agencies like HHS and preserving information. I wanted to ask you if you are aware of any efforts from people in the EPA who are preserving essential information that communities may need or that may be beneficial to people across the country.
Yeah, I would say the effort to preserve data and research and things like that is not just a government task. After the first Trump administration and the loss of a lot of websites, the loss of a lot of data, there were a lot of nonprofits, academics, regulators who stepped in and A, made a concerted effort to protect these things, but B, kind of learned from what happened in the first Trump administration. And between the election and the inauguration this time around, quickly went and downloaded every data set, right? Catalog websites. There's tools such as the Wayback Machine, for instance, which kind of creates, it kind of creates copies of the internet. And so there are, if you look around the internet, there are versions of EPA websites and EPA data, historically that have been preserved. Now, I think the bigger question right now is, even if we protected these data streams that may have been decades in the works, what happens now, right? Do we just stop monitoring now and going forward? And as we try to do research, as we try to do science, is there going to be this gap? Is there going to be this just loss of knowledge from this loss of wisdom from an X number of years period, and there probably is.
Wow. Once again, my guest is Mark Olalde. He's a ProPublica investigative journalist covering the environment, natural resources, and public health. Thank you so much for coming on the show again. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Again, that was my full interview with Mark Olalde. He's a ProPublica environmental reporter speaking about what's going on at the EPA in terms of these cuts. We're going to be having more reporting on this in the coming days, in the coming weeks, as we continue to follow several different stories in terms of what this administration is doing. This morning, I reported on the administration's attacks on domestic terrorism protections in this country. We're soon going to be diving into how this administration is making us far less safer as a country in terms of revoking national security protections, completely just getting rid of that. So we're going to be focusing on several different compelling parts and more. So if you're interested in something that the administration is doing that you think is not getting enough attention that you want me to cover here on the show, please let me know. Of course, tonight we are on high watch for the potential passage of Donald Trump's big budget bill, which will be disastrous for the country if it passes. So far, as of recording this, the first vote has failed. You got a couple of no votes to advance this over the weekend, which resulted in Republican Senator Tim Tillis of North Carolina announcing that he's not going to be running for re-election. He's just going to retire because he's a no on this bill. Democratic Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said that Republicans need to be more transparent about what's going in this bill and what's happening behind the scenes. He told reporters, quote, "They are doing all kinds of deals with our other members, backroom deals, side deals. We have to see them, and they can't keep them secret from us or the American people. And we can't move. We can't get things done the way we're supposed to unless they show us how they're changing the bill, because they're changing in numerous ways," end quote. So we are watching this very closely once again as this is happening. We're going to have a more full breakdown, detailed breakdown on what's in the bill coming up very soon here on the show. Of course, Republicans are trying to basically ram this through Congress to get this passed by July 4th. A big Independence Day thing, but nothing screams, celebrate independence than passing a bill that is great for the oligarchs and the billionaires and horrible for democracy. So we'll keep you updated on this story as we're continuing to follow this and more. Of course, tomorrow is my off day. I'll be back on Wednesday, and then Thursday is my off day, and then I'll be back on Friday, and then I'll see you back again next week as well. So stay tuned for here on the Jeremiah Patterson Show. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to comment, like, as well as comment your suggestions or your questions or your concerns, any topics you'd like me to cover. Please put that in the comments below. You can follow me on Blue Sky and Substack at tjpsnews. You can also email me tjpsnews@gmail.com. You can support the Jeremiah Patterson Show financially, as this is independent journalism, and we do rely on your donations to continue this crucial work. Of course, these are one of several platforms that you could support the show at to make a one-time donation. If you want to become a paid subscriber to the Jeremiah Patterson Show, you can become one on Substack at TJPS News for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year. It has been a crazy day in the news. I hope you enjoyed this show. I did my best to put this together because there's a lot that's going on. There are 100 other topics I could have led today. There are 100 other topics I could have covered, but more coverage will be coming out in Wednesday and Friday shows. So stay tuned. Eyes open, heads up, stay focused. Be a part of the resistance movement.